Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to have a discussion about some stuff that Martin Scorsese aired out a couple days ago via Harper's Magazine and via an essay he wrote for Harper's Magazine. Now, that magazine is mainly an art house type of film magazine. It has a lot to do with the film with the more creative aspects of the film industry and more artsy type of stuff. And Scorsese decided to write this essay. Now, he's been receiving some amount of backlash for. I don't think as much as his comments last year about how Marvel movies are not cinema, although those people are popping up out of the woodwork again. But this is a bit more of a broad stroke on a similar idea, and what I mean by that is. It's the idea that cinema has been devalued to the point where it is no longer an art form in many cases. It has simply been turned into a quote unquote product or content, as he puts it. I'm gonna go over this a little bit, but I'm gonna read a couple of excerpts from it. And the first excerpt is going to be from the very beginning, and the second excerpt is going to be from the very end. The middle part of the essay mostly has to do with him talking about Federico Fellini, who was a very big influence on him and his filmmaking. Um, let's dive into the first thing, and this is after a little bit of a. It's almost like a scene description, actually, of a guy walking down the New York street, going to a cinema and seeing all these different things that are playing in these various New York art house cinemas. And now we go to the actual beginning of the essay, which is where Scorsese starts, writing out his thoughts. And let's start here. So, flash forward to present day as the art of cinema is being systematically devalued, sidelined, demeaned, and reduced to its lowest common denominator content. And content is in parentheses. As recently as 15 years ago, the term content was heard only when people were discussing the cinema on a serious level, and it was contrasted with and measured against form. Again, like an art form. Then gradually it was used more and more by the people who took over media companies, most of whom knew nothing about the history of the art form or even cared enough to think that they should. Content became a business term for all moving images. A David Lean movie, a cat video, a Super Bowl commercial, a superhero sequel, a series episode. It was linked, of course, not to the theatrical experience, but to home viewing on the streaming platforms that have come to overtake the movie going experience, just as Amazon overtook physical stores. On the one hand, this has been good for filmmakers, myself included. On the other hand, it has created a situation in which everything is presented to the viewer on a level playing field, which sounds democratic, but isn't. If further viewing is suggested by algorithms based on what you've already seen, and the suggestions are based only on subject matter or genre, then what does that do to the art of cinema? Curating isn't undemocratic or elitist, a term that is used, excuse me, curating isn't undemocratic or elitist, a term that is now used so often that it's becoming meaningless. It's an act of generosity. You're sharing what you love and what has inspired you. He puts a little bit of parentheses there about Turner Classic Movies and some other stuff, but that doesn't really have anything to do with it. Algorithms, by definition, are based on calculations that treat the viewer as a consumer and nothing else. The choices made by distributors such as Amos Vogel at Grove Press back in the 60s were not just acts of generosity, but quite often of bravery. Dan Talbot, who was an exhibitor and programmer, started New York Films, or the New Yorker Films, I should say, in order to distribute a film he loved, Bertolucci's Before the Revolution. Not exactly a safe bet. The pictures that came to these shores, thanks to the efforts of these and other distributors and curators and exhibitors, made for an extraordinary moment. The circumstances of that moment are gone forever, from the primacy of the theatrical experience to the shared excitement over the possibilities of cinema. That's why I go back to those years so often. I feel lucky to have been young and alive and open to all of it as it was happening. The cinema has always been much more than content, and it always will be. And the years when those films were coming out from all over the world, talking to each other and redefining the art form on a weekly basis are the proof. Okay. Now, just for further reference, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to link the link to the essay in the description of this because it is a very long essay, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. So if you guys actually want to read the entire essay, I'm going to link it down there so you guys can. But let's talk about that statement first. Now, the whole base around that, and I'm boiling it down to mainly his talking points here, is the idea that movies have been lumped in with all other forms of media as a broad term known as content. And I've heard it also referred to as a product, and I've referred to it as a product as well when I'm talking about it in business terms. And in business terms, those type of terms make sense. It's something that's broad. It does cover the bases in terms of what it actually is, but when you look at a really good movie, it's very, very different. It is not. When movies transcend into an art form, like a lot of other things do, and I've gone over this in other videos before, the idea that there are art films, there are films that are made for artistic purposes, and there are films that are made simply to make money. And if you look at Marvel films, for instance, those films are made specifically to make money. They are not made with the idea of making art. When you look at other films, like again, if you take Scorsese's movies, those films were all written by him. He sought production for them, he got production for them, and he made the movies. And a lot of them were very successful, and he's won many, many Oscars because of them. But when you look at the other films, they do make more money, which is why they're more appealing to people that are in studios. But the other thing that he mentions is that the people that took over these media companies didn't care about creativity, and that's right in a lot of cases. You look at what's happened to Disney, especially after I'm not sure who was the CEO before Michael Eisner was, but Michael Eisner was really the start of the corporatization of Disney in terms of the way that they functioned. They lost a lot of the heart and soul, so to speak, if you want to put it that way. They became a corporate machine, and then that was simply carried over by Bob Iger, and then it's been continued on to today, where it's basically there's no more veil of secrecy or anything like that. They just took the veil off, and now we just know what they are. Warner Brothers and a lot of other larger studios have gone through the same thing. And he also relates that to algorithms and streaming services. Again, this is a man who just released a film on Netflix last year. So it does seem a tad hypocritical, but I understand the point, and it's a valid one. The idea of algorithms. So let's say the only thing that you watch on Netflix is The Office. What are you going to get in terms of recommendations from Netflix? You're going to get stuff that's related to The Office or stuff that's like it. So you're going to get Office Space, for movies. If you're going to talk about that, you're going to get like Office Space. Maybe you'll get like Network if that's on there, something like that. So a lot of things that take place in offices or office buildings, and a lot of comedy stuff that's kind of similar on that level. Even other shows like 30 Rock. Again, I don't know if those are on Netflix. I'm just giving examples. But the thing is, it doesn't give you the ability really to. It presents things to you as a suggestion, as opposed to allowing you to find your own way through the system. And I understand that in terms of the ease of access and stuff like that. I understand why suggestions are there. I understand why certain things work on an algorithm. At the same time, you have other things like YouTube and other things that work on algorithms. And I agree that it's kind of insulting to the viewer in that sense, because you're now treating them as if they're simply a number. They're simply, oh, hey, he's part of this group that only watches this one show on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon. So that means that he would be interested in X, Y, and Z. And then you have somebody else like, okay, this person watched, let's take Netflix, for example, because that's the biggest one on the market. Let's take Marriage Story with Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver. Watch that. Okay, now you're going to get a bunch of romantic dramas and stuff like that, or romantic movies in general, or dramedies. Anything related to drama or related to relationship issues is probably what you're going to see on your feed. But that cuts out everything else. It basically puts blinders on you, in a sense, where you only get interested in one type. You don't expand your horizons to other things. It keeps you focused on one thing, and then they simply just create products, or in this case, product or content, quote unquote, to continue you down that path and things for you to consume. It reminds me a lot of the if you remember the Rise of Skywalker guy, the guy that watched the trailer and he crapped himself and cried and stuff on camera, and everybody made fun of him. Most of it was probably an act, but regardless, there was a meme that came out of that was pretty accurate, which was loyal fan to a company that the company also hates, and basically just goes, loyal fan consumes product, enjoys product, spouts endless good things about product, then sits there and waits for new product. It's literally treating you like a machine or a robot that simply just consumes the products that they have. And then if you say that you don't like the product or the product isn't good, then they simply have a scapegoat for that, which is to say that you didn't understand it or you don't like it because of whatever reason. Or you're just mad because cinema has changed. And one of the other things that Scorsese goes through in the essay is the idea that innovation in cinema has stagnated, which I would agree with. I don't think there's many people that are innovating anymore, and I think a lot of that has to do with the studio system, as he mentions, because the studio system is looking for safe bets. They are looking for business. They are looking for money, because money is the bottom line to every single studio, especially right now. And those studios are going to do the financially correct choice. They're not going to take a chance on a film that they think is going to fail. And taking that logic, there's a lot of very popular films that probably would not be made today if they were presented. Stuff like Star Wars. The first Star Wars movie was, I mean, before it got saved in the editing room, basically, everybody thought it was going to be a flop, to the point that Fox actually allowed George Lucas to keep the merchandising rights for that movie, which essentially gave him a media empire overnight. So there's not that movie would probably have never been made today because no studio had enough faith in it, and nobody was probably willing to throw enough money at it. And that's the other problem is that you have people that are not, like he mentioned, the distributors, the people that brought those films over and showed them to people in the States. Films from Europe, and more specifically, he cites Italy, and you could look at French films and German films and English films and stuff from the time as well, from the 60s and 70s. And those films were very, very different, but it influenced American filmmaking and American filmmakers, including Scorsese and many, many others. But now we don't have that. We have weird things that come over from other countries, like that weird French film that's on Netflix, which I'm not going to mention in this because it's kind of off topic. But you have these things that are being thrown, kind of just thrown around, and the American audiences have been kind of. I don't want to say subjugated, but conditioned almost to accept a film a certain way. And when it doesn't necessarily go that way, or when maybe it's something that maybe they don't understand or they don't look at in the same way as other people, then it's viewed as a failure. And the thing is that not all films are meant to be viewed in the same vein as a Marvel movie or something like that. You can't go in and sit down and watch multiple films and think it's going to be the same. And when I say multiple films, I mean multiple films from different directors, from different studios, from different people about different things. It's you can do little check marks with Marvel films at this point because they almost have a formula to it. And that's also the case with a lot of other films too. You look at the Fast and the Furious series. It's like, okay, just do outrageous things with cars. That's literally all those movies are for the most part. There's not really all that much story, let's put it that way. Most of it is a lot of these little they have some story in there, obviously, because it's a film, but most of it is based around the car stunts. But that's enough about me talking about that first thing. Let's go into the second excerpt, and I'll try to make this a little bit quicker because I know I'm dragging on a little bit. Everything has changed. The cinema and the importance it holds in our culture. Of course, it's hardly surprising that artists such as Goddard, Bergman, Kubrick, and Fellini, who once reigned over our great art form like gods, would eventually recede into the shadows with the passing of time. But at this point, we can't take anything for granted. We can't depend on the movie business, such as it is, to take care of cinema. In the movie business, which is now the mass visual entertainment business, the emphasis is always on the word business, and value is always determined by the amount of money to be made from any given property in that sense. Everything from Sunrise to La Strada to 2001 is now pretty much wrung dry and ready for the art film swim lane on a streaming platform. Those of us who know the cinema and its history have to share our love and our knowledge with as many people as possible, and we have to make it crystal clear to the current legal owners of these films that they amount to much, much more than mere property to be exploited and then locked away. They are among the greatest treasures of our culture, and they must be treated accordingly. I suppose we also have to refine our notions of what cinema is and what it isn't. Federico Fellini is a good place to start. You can say a lot of things about Fellini's movies, but here's one thing that is incontestable, not uncontestable. They are cinema. Fellini's work goes a long way towards defining the art form. Now, Martin Scorsese's definition of cinema is a tad different than mine, so I'm not going to say. His definition of cinema is a movie that adds to the genre, not to the genre, but to the art form in a sense. It's a movie, movies that progress the art form forward. When people do something that people haven't done before. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of things have already been done in film. The technology has basically been pushed to the point to the wherever it's going to go. I mean, there's not much more that you can do in the form of actual filmmaking in terms of at least the visuals. I mean, when you get to the point where you can see the pores on an actor's face, I mean, I don't think you can increase the fidelity of the image anymore. But it's really more about the creativity of the directors and the camera angles and the lighting and the way things are presented to you in a film. And that's what he's talking about a lot with Fellini and a lot of these other directors, is that they were doing things at the time with film and with visual storytelling that had not been done before. You look at the one that I'm most familiar with, probably out of the bunch that he's mentioned, is Kubrick's 2001. And Kubrick's 2001 is a movie that you need to watch multiple times to kind of get what's going on. And when I say get what's going on, I mean just get a grasp on it, because that movie, a lot of it is told through visual storytelling. It's not told through dialogue for the most part. There is dialogue in the movie, and it does fit very well, but the first, I think, 20 to 25 minutes of the film is completely wordless. The scenes with the primitive apes and stuff making tools and all that, and you're really just supposed to pay attention to it and get involved in it and kind of draw parallels with these very primitive apes that will eventually evolve into people. Not obviously not those specific apes, but the species. Let's put it that way. And at the end of that, you see kind of the start of it with the monolith and all that stuff, and then you fast forward to where humanity has passed that. Now they're in space frequently, and all this science fiction stuff comes in, or extra science fiction stuff, I should say, and it's a surreal experience. And the way that he talks about Fellini is the way that I see certain Italian horror films. And when I know I go back to Italian horror a lot, but the point is that the films that he talks about are experience movies. They're not necessarily meant to have a solid, coherent plot. They're meant to give you an experience. And I can say that a lot with a lot of Italian filmmakers, Dario Argento specifically. And when I'm talking about that, I also mean specifically Suspiria. That is an experience movie. There is a plot to it. There is a very loose plot to it. But that's not what the movie's for. The movie is to send you through this horrifyingly insane nightmare that you come out the end and you wake up. That's really what it is you start this movie from a point where you're in reality. It's literally almost like a dream sequence. The entire film is almost like a dream sequence, even with the music, and it works to kind of draw you into that. That's kind of what Scorsese says about some of Fellini's work that he's watched. But I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but the whole point that he's trying to make is that cinema should be treated as an art form, and it should be protected by the people that consume it, by the people that love it, by the people that enjoy watching it and keeping it close to them. People like me, people like him, people like any moviegoer that loves film in whatever fashion you might love it in. Preserve it, keep it. Tell people to watch these movies, to learn from them. Encourage people to get into filmmaking. Encourage people to do things that might not be, the industry standard. Let's put it that way. Do things that are outside the box. Encourage creativity in film, because I think that's his main point here, is that there is no creativity left in modern filmmaking in a studio sense, because they are not willing to take risks on smaller movies unless they know they can market them for a reason. Again, I went over this a few days ago with the whole bad publicity thing with David Fincher, where their movie, the only reason why Mank was allowed to be made was because people knew it was going to win Oscars, and that's why they pushed it, because it was going to be something that the studio could hang their hat on. And it's the same thing here. If you make a movie that or if you want to make a movie that a studio head says isn't going to be profitable, then that studio head's going to talk to other studio heads, or other studio people, I should say, producers, and he's going to say, yeah, this movie's a piece of garbage. Don't make it. It's not going to make money. But the movie still might be good. It might make money. It's all a betting game, and Hollywood is not willing to take low bets anymore because they don't have people that believe in filmmakers anymore. They have people that believe in profit. But I'm dragging myself on a little bit here, but I just wanted to kind of go over that because Scorsese is a brilliant filmmaker. He's been a brilliant filmmaker for many years, and he has a lifetime of experience in this industry. And when he puts out something like this, where he's talking about how the studios are just bang again, these are the people that he works for, that he's worked for years, and he's basically saying that they're creatively bankrupt, and that they're unwilling to cultivate creativity anymore because of the money issues, or because of the issue that they only want films that are going to make them blockbuster styles of money, or they only want films that are going to get them Oscar nods, which again, those films fall into very niche categories these days. It's the Oscar films are whatever the hot button topic happens to be for the day, and the blockbuster films are almost a dime a dozen at this point. It's just all spectacle. So again, it's just something that's kind of interesting and sad to me at the same time, because everything he says here is 100% true. I believe 100% of what he said in this essay. And like I said, I'll put it in the link. I'll link it below so you guys can read it if you want to. But I want to know what you think. Do you think Scorsese's right? Do you think he's not right? If you've read the essay, do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it? And any of your favorite films that you love, that you want to keep, that you keep, and that, actually, you know what? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite movie? What's the movie that you sit down and you could watch endlessly? Mine is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, so I don't know if I would really be on Scorsese's favorite list for that, because that is a franchise movie. But at the same time, there are personal reasons why I like it. But I want to know what you think. Put your thoughts in the comments below. As usual, I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications. Hit the like button. Subscribe. And remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?